The schools may be gone, but the legends live forever. Welcome to the Final Jumpshot podcast. Here's your host, Marcus Carlton.
Well, hello again, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Final Jumpshot podcast. In today's episode, we're going to step back into the 2B East Conference, but we're not headed back to my home this time. This time around, we're going to head over into Lion Country in Lawrence County, the Lynn Lions, and specifically Jared Richey. Jared was class of '88 and an excellent player on one of the best teams at Lynn that didn't make it to state, nor even the regional tournament. An amazing season cut short of what could have been. I'll let Jared give you the details on that one. So without further ado, here's my interview with former Lynn Lion, Jared Richey. Well, joining me now on the Final Jump Shot podcast is a fellow 2B East basketballer from back in the day, a former Lynn Lion turned Brooklyn Bearcat, Jared Richey. Jared, I appreciate you coming on the show with me, man.
Hey, thank you for having me, Marcus. I appreciate it.
So you are a former Lynn Lion. Like I said, you played, I believe you graduated '88. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Graduated '88, played on probably one of the best teams in Lynn that I remember from my lifetime. I'm a little bit younger than you, but I remember, you guys, I was about a 9-10-year-old kid when you were playing against Brad Haygood and Chris Eddington and those guys. And I remember it seemed like every time that we faced off with Lynn, you guys broke my heart, man.
Well, we were fortunate. I don't know how we had the Buffalo's number, but yes, we seemed to always play well against them. Wow, yeah, they were great team. Yeah, my senior year, I believe they won the regional tournament. And so even though, we won when we faced off against us, they made it farther than we did in the postseason.
So talk about playing at Lynn, and I mentioned the old 2B East Conference. it was Lynn and Biggersreno and Strawberry and Williford and Poughkeepsie and Oak Ridge Central, and I feel like there's somebody I'm leaving out. But, talk about playing in that conference and what it was like.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I believe St. Paul was in our conference.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about them.
Yeah, it was awesome. I think it's one of those things you don't realize going through it because it's just kind of normal what you grow up with. But just the friendships and connections that were made throughout the playing years and that continued over the years. Went to school, went to college with a lot of those guys, and even though it's very competitive and rivals on the floor, you end up getting to know a lot of those. I think that was one of the most special things is just the small schools and just those connections that you make and hold on to throughout life.
So I remember playing out at Lynn in the in what people our age would call the old gym, the one that had the steel beams between the bleachers and the floor. And, I always liked playing out there. I don't know what it was. I liked playing out there much better than I liked trying to watch a game out there because, as you well know, when you're sitting in the stands, they were kind of elevated. You had to go up steps to get to them. And then you've got the steel beams, the support beams that kind of run down, I don't know, every 8, 10, 12 feet, something like that. That gym had a very unique setup. And, I feel like when we played out there that you guys definitely had a home court advantage.
Oh, probably so. Yes. It reminds me of the Clover Bend. I didn't never get to play in Clover Bend, but I remember watching some games in that gym, and it was a similar setup. Yes, definitely as a spectator, you got to avoid the beams, but as a player, it did have just that feel. And Brad Haygood, I think he talked about it in that special, just it's always going to be packed. It doesn't matter what night it is, if it's a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. A lot of schools who have that football is their big thing. The small towns will close down for Friday night football game. Well, in those small schools in the 2B East, you kind of got that feel. You were fortunate enough to get that feel a couple times a week. It was special, not just Lynn, but all those small gyms that you go to. You just had that atmosphere that just seemed very special and inviting. You know, you talk about playing in hostile environments. I don't really feel like we played in a hostile environment in the 2B East. We played on some tough. Well, take that back. Maybe the Swift and Pirates, man. When you went to George Kell.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. It was all very welcoming. All the patrons just loved basketball, and it was great. It really was.
Well, and it's, you know, the recurring theme that seems to pop up with everybody that I've talked to for this show. You know, I'm talking to you. I've talked to Brad and Chris from Biggers Reno. I've talked to Nelson Catalina, who played at Turl, and a few others. You know, there were a couple Leachville people as well, and they all talked about how in these smaller schools, especially the ones that don't have football, you know, when basketball is all you have and you start playing middle of October and you play all the way through to, you know, hopefully into March, because that means you had a really good season, but it's the heartbeat of the community. I mean, it's if you need to see somebody during the week, you just say to yourself, okay, well, I'll see them at the ball game Tuesday night, or I'll see them Friday night. And then people didn't just come to socialize, man. People came to watch the games.
Oh, yes, that's very well put, Marcus. It was the heartbeat of the community. And you're right. They didn't come to socialize. It seemed, you know, they were attentive on the games. If you go to a lot of games nowadays, especially in the bigger arenas and so forth, a lot of it is to socialize, and a good part of the crowd's not even paying attention, you know, to the games. It was very special.
So let's dive off into it, man. When you start talking about your playing days as a Lynn Lion, what are some of your favorite memories that you have on the floor, or maybe off? I mean, maybe there's good stories about, you know, something that the statute of limitations is up on that you can talk about on riding the bus to the game or something, you know.
Oh, that was special. That makes me think of Mr. Ez Richey. He was a gentleman in the community that loved basketball, and I think all those small communities had a few people like that were just a staple in the community and would go to every game. And Mr. Ez, he loved games so much that Coach would let him travel on the bus with us. You know, and so going to away games or home game, we knew Mr. Ez was going to be there. And like I said, I think all of the smaller communities had that. But memories, wow, you know, it could just go on and on about the great memories. I think one thing that really stands out and is the great teammates that I had, the great people that I was around. You know, looking back, you know, I had Donnie Thacker, Danny Morgan, you know, David Durham, who's still officiating games, his brother John, Brent Glenn, Billy and David Doyle, just solid people. Keenan Woodard, Bobby Burrow, Fred Morgan, Taylor Howard. I could just go on and on mentioning just such good people that I don't know if I realized just how fortunate I was to grow up with such good classmates, good teammates that were just, can't put it any other way than just good, caring people. That's some of the best memories right there. And I know that really doesn't stand out as basketball, but as far as on the floor, my junior year probably was some of the most memorable. We played Cave City in a game. It was a thriller. It was 110-101 there at Lynn. And I believe we were up, you know, going in the third quarter, we were up 20-something points, or going into the fourth quarter. And Cave City outscored us like 41-15, something like that. And so we ended up winning the game, fortunately, but just, you don't have many games that in high school where both teams are in the hundreds, you know. That was a thriller. And then the same year we hosted the county tournament, which, you know, how big the Lawrence County tournament was. It still is, you know. It's a staple for the county. And, of course, you couldn't fit another soul in the gym. And we ended up playing Walnut Ridge in the finals. Really just we were lucky to win that game. We won playing against Matt Dean, who's
I've heard that name.
He's coached in the area several years. Great, outstanding guy. Great coach. And anyway, I went 0 for 5 from the free throw line that night because I remember I was going to the free throw line with like 4 or 5 seconds left. We're up 1. Could have iced it, because the 3-point line wasn't in place yet. It came into place, I guess, my senior year. And I missed that free throw. And Matt goes down and gets a short jumper and falls short, goes in and out, I believe. And so we ended up winning. So we were very lucky. And I felt bad for Matt. We were friends at the time. And we were just very lucky to win that game. And then we go on and host the regional tournament that year. And playing against Coach Haygood, who was at Maynard.
Mm-hmm.
We ended up playing them and lose or go home game, and it went to 7 overtimes.
Wow.
I think, yes, that was definitely a memorable game. I think at the end of regulation, it was like 24-24. He played the slow ball,
mm-hmm.
that night, and I remember our coach saying, well, we can do the same thing. So whoever got the tip, basically, in all the overtimes just held for the last shot.
Wow, 7 overtimes. I mean, that is unheard of, even by today's standards. And you mentioned the low score. For those listening who may not realize it, the shot clock hasn't always been around in Arkansas high school ball. It's just within the last few years that it was there. And so you could play the slow game and kind of lull your opponent to sleep on defense and end up with an easy backdoor layup or something by catching them off guard. And I can't imagine 7 overtimes. I mean, what's going through your mind about overtime number 4?
I don't know. I remember we weren't too tired because it was a slow game, and just thought, oh, this is never going to end. Just kept thinking our season's going to be over if we don't. And I think I had an opportunity in a couple of the overtimes at the free throw line and maybe another shot to win it, and I blew it. I think both times. It was crazy. And the late Greg Rainwater was on that Maynard team.
Yep.
One of the men that I respected tremendously, God rest his soul. He's just a great individual. But to be a part of that game, yes, it was very special, very intense. Like I say, it makes the intensity level move up greatly whenever, if you lose, you're going home for the year.
Yeah, and that's always a bitter pill to swallow. And I talked with some of the other guys about this and started asking them about their memories of big games that they've won. And again, the common theme is, well, I can remember a couple, but the losses seem to stick with me more than the wins did.
Oh yes, yeah, definitely had some heartbreaks. Those do stand out. My senior year, in fact, was probably my 2 most devastating losses. They opened up the Convocation Center my senior year. And of course they put the 3-point line in place. And so we were one of the first, it was the first NEA tournament to be held, which is now First National Bank Arena. And we faced off against Bay. I believe we may have been a 1 or 2 seed. Bay come out and played our socks off. I remember Keenan Woodard hit a shot, sent it in overtime. But they got the best of us in that first round. We were hoping to maybe claim our first NEA title. We'd been put out by Valley View in the semis the year before, or 2 years before. But it wasn't in the cards. And looking back, it was not a heartbreak to lose, but it was one of those games that really put my team down. I did not play well at all. And then the same year, we go on to the district tournament, and back then, Marcus, if you won conference, then doesn't mean you're automatically going to regionals.
Right.
And in the second round, we had to face off against Swifton, who we had their number that year. Previous 2 years, they pretty much had our number, but they had some outstanding talent. With Jabo Floyd was the coach, and players like Greg Eldridge, Rubel Duckerson, and Preston Floyd. Preston, he could shoot the lights out. And that game, he got the best of us again. It was one of those where you're done for the year. You won the conference, and we knew we were facing Swifton for the fourth time, and beat them 3 times earlier that year, and they were just too good a team for us that night. And again, I felt like I let the team down, and when you got to go, that's your last game of your career, so that makes it tough. So that was probably definitely the biggest heartbreak was that night.
I remember that vividly because Biggers was on the other side of the bracket and they knew that it was like, okay, well, we can avoid Lynn until we get to the finals, and then just kind of line up and see what happens there. And when I talked to Brad and Chris a little bit, they brought up the fact that being opposite of you guys in the district tournament bracket was one of the key pieces to that run they put together at the end of the season, because they were fully expecting to have to face you guys in the finals. And because of the season you guys had, I mean, just an absolutely tremendous season. It felt like you guys rolled through the 2B East with very little issue at all, and get there. And I know, not trying to rub salt in the wound here, but, to get all the way through the season and then to come up and have that disappointment where you start thinking about, what could have been, if they had, let's just say, for instance, at that time, the 2B East takes 4 teams to the regional. I mean, there's a pretty good chance that 2 of those teams out of the 2B East probably would have ended up in the regional final that year.
Oh, you're right. No doubt. And Brad and Chris, they were playing great basketball toward the end of the year. I remember they were rolling because I was thinking that having to face off against them again, because even though they might have felt fortunate to be opposite side, we kind of felt the same way because they were playing some really good basketball there at the end of the year. You know how hard it is to beat the team multiple times, but we didn't get that chance. Swifton put us out there in the second round, and but I was happy to go on and see Biggers have success. That was another thing that, just talking about the 2B East, that you never felt like, or I didn't as a player, that you were going in dreading to play a team, maybe because they were just so dirty and just not like them. Mm-hmm. It was, for the most part, it was just, good, hard-nosed basketball and you respect level was very high in the 2B East for each other.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think for the most part that carried on, several years later into when I played, especially against Lynn. I played against, guys like Shane Evans and Stephen Bristow. Before the game, like when they bring the captains out to talk or whatever, we'd kind of laugh and joke with those guys a little bit. But when the ball went up in the air, man, it was, we kind of turned that off, while the game was going on. Nothing dirty ever happened or anything. But like you said, man, just good, hard-nosed basketball. And then as soon as the game was over, man, post-game handshake, we're kind of, hey, man, we got you this time, but that doesn't mean we're going to get y'all next time. I mean, it was a mutual respect kind of deal. You don't see that. To me, I don't see that near as much now as I did back, as a kid watching guys like you play. There was that mutual respect, and I don't like to see games get chippy now, like you see, because it's. Again, there's supposed to be a level of sportsmanship there. And, I felt like that, yes, we played hard. It might be a hard foul, but one of the guys from the opposite team might go over to help somebody up after a hard foul, and it was just, again, one of those aspects where playing at a small school was really different in my eyes.
Oh, I agree 100%, Marcus. Yes, it does get chippy. It tends to get chippy nowadays with a lot of especially the rivalry, when you're playing your rivalry, mm-hmm. It does get chippy.
Well, and speaking on rivalry, Strawberry Rangers, that was you guys' big rival, right?
It was.
Yeah.
It was, I guess, in thinking about that, Mitch Bell was on that team, trying to think, Rennie Holder, some other great guys, and Mitch and I are really close friends now. You mentioned Chris and Brad. We were close. Brad was we went to college together. Chris and I actually lived together for a while in college. But my respect level, kind of going to that rivalry thing, you did still have that respect, even though you feel like you're facing off against your enemies.
Yeah. But
looking back, really, I think Swifton was more of a rivalry for us than Strawberry. Strawberry had some really good teams. They did with Mitch's brother, Perry Bell. Was good. I'm trying to think of some of the others. Audell Ballner, Greg Crabtree. Some great guys, like I was talking about earlier, that I got to experience teammates, but those were great guys, and living so close, it couldn't help but be a rivalry with the Strawberry Rangers. You're right.
Well, and I remember, like playing games, the guys that I felt like I could be friends with. Honestly, that was who I wanted to beat the most, because you just knew there was a good competition there.
Oh, that's true. And just thinking about going to all those gyms, I'm trying to recalling going back to Strawberry's gym to play. And it was like that in any gym. You just dreaded it because you're like, oh my gosh. It was like every team had such an advantage. You were talking about how we felt playing in Lynn's gym and the advantage we had, but that home court advantage, I think, in 2B East, it was just, it was tough to go into somebody else's house and win.
Yeah. And it was across the board, like you said. I mean, even going like out to Oak Ridge for a game. I mean, you knew it was going to be full. Yes. You knew it was going to be loud and very rowdy. And it was just, I mean, looking back now, I mean, I'm looking at it and I'm like, man, that was so much fun. But at the time you're thinking, man, we can't give these guys an inch because this crowd's going to get behind them, and who knows what's going to happen there.
Oh, no kidding. That's true.
Basketball runs pretty deep in your family because, as I understand, your sister was a heck of a ball player as well, right?
She was, and she was a big influence on me. She was, Stacy was 3 years older than me, and growing up, she was my closest sibling. I was the youngest out of four, and but anyway, we were closer. We were closer in age, and she really, I think, intentionally at times, but unintentionally, indirectly, she was really mentored me and helped me. I can remember, she was very good. She played baseball through Little League. She was a pitcher and shortstop. And like I say, in basketball, very good. And I remember I could not beat her in one-on-one. We had multiple games, one-on-one in the backyard or in the gym. And until I finally hit my growth spurt between 8th and 9th grade, I was finally able to win some of those one-on-one games. But she was very talented, and she played a major role in not just basketball for me, but in life as well.
You talking about her as one of the major influences on you. Who are some of the other people that you would say, maybe not just on the court, but on the court and off? Growing up in Lynn, who were some of those other people that had a big influence on you?
I would say I definitely have to mention my brother Greg. He was 6 years older than me, but I can remember, you talked about being 9 or 10 and going and watching, teams play, and I remember going and watching him play. And so he had an influence on me, but being older, that influence was limited, being 6 years older than me. And I have to mention my mother. My mom was a huge influence. She's very special, still living, still in the same house in Lynn that I grew up in. But she would record every basketball game on note cards. Mm. And later on, it was just a thing, but later on she'd tell me, she said, well, it would keep me from yelling, at the games, because I never heard my mom yell once, never heard her call my name or anything. She just sat up there. And so it's very special to have every game I ever played. She recorded on note cards. She kept up with all the players, all the stats from our team and the other team as well, and never missed a game. And so she was a single mom, raising us. And I remember she'd be get up at 3:30 in the morning to have to go to work at Batesville. And yet still, if we had that long game on a weekday night at, somewhere Oak Ridge or where we got to travel, not getting in till 10 or 11, my mom, she never missed a game in my whole career playing. So definitely influenced me, and of course was always very encouraging. And then I can't not mention my coaches, Mr. George. It was odd. I guess he was always known as Mr. George for as long as he coached. 2B East had some great ones, Mr. George, I believe he was in his 44th or 45th year, my senior year. That's a long time to coach. But him and Van Dieter, assistant coach, and Van was my baseball coach. Those two gentlemen, may get choked up talking about them. They were great father figures to me. Mr. George, didn't know at the time. I knew he was getting up in age, but found out later that he had 2 knee replacement surgery, 2 hip replacement, and just the amount of pain that he was in, still coaching, but doing what he loved. And I was fortunate enough to grow up 2 houses down from him. And like I said, he did take me under his wing. He'd take me fishing. I remember one day, my mom got a call and said that, "Hey, Mr. George, needs your help pulling a calf out in the field." Our house was just surrounded by his pastures. And I said, "Okay, pulling a calf. I don't even know what that means, but I'm gone." So I get out there to the field. Mr. George has ropes around the feet of the calf that's still inside the cow. And so I'm tugging on it with him. It pulls the cow out. Cow's not breathing. He clears the passageway, doing CPR into the nose of the calf to give it life. And that's one of those moments you just don't forget. But I'm so grateful for both Mr. George and Van Dieter. And they taught us the importance. We talked about that good sportsmanship earlier. They were significant in teaching us the respect and having respect for the game, respect for each other, respect for our opponents, the officials. They instilled that sportsmanship, and they wanted us to compete by doing it the right way. We talked about playing hard, clean-nosed basketball, but that's what we were taught. And those 2 gentlemen, very high on my list.
That's great stuff, man. And I want to jump back just for a minute to your mom and the note card thing. That's probably one of the most unique things I've ever heard of a parent doing, because in my day, you drug in the big, 50-pound VHS camcorder thing if you had it. And yes. And we had some parents that would go that way. But the note card thing, that is interesting, because being able to keep up with all that during the game and still keep your eye kind of focused on the game, I mean, that took some attention to detail, I'm sure. And I love the reason behind why she did it, because I understand now that I have kids of my own, I have to really work. And it's not that I'm yelling in a negative way or anything, but just to kind of encourage or, just show the support. But my son has told me, he's like, "Dad," he's a big baseball player. And he's like, "Dad, you can yell up to the point when I get in the batter's box, but then you got to be quiet." And and I'm like, okay, so I've started recording every at bat that he has, because it's my way of not, of keeping myself quiet and not yelling and being a distraction. And the note card thing is just that's really unique. I don't think I've ever heard of anybody doing that on the games. And And what a memory to have those note cards, and you can kind of, glance over them and the memories start flooding back to you. I mean, that's got to be just really cool. And the fact that, your mom still lives in the house that you grew up in. I mean, that, again, speaking to the small town thing, it's so unique, because I don't know of many people that can say that their parents still live, in the same house that they grew up in the same small town, even now that the school is gone. I mean, that, to me, that is so unique.
Oh, that's true. And back to the note card thing, that she put together a album, which a lot of parents do, for graduation. Mm-hmm. That's what she gave me, just pictures from an infant all the way through graduation. And of course, had many pictures of playing basketball, playing baseball, but she included all those note cards of each game, the stats from each game in that album. So that's definitely cherished, and I can't thank her enough. I talked to her yesterday. She'll be 89 this year.
Wow.
Like, what are you doing, Mom? Well, I was out pulling weeds, but she's blessed to have good health, and it is special having, get to go back to the house that you were raised in. Mm-hmm. And like, talking about those memories, just flooding you. I'll probably take that for granted and shouldn't, that I get to go back and when I visit her, still have the house that all my years were spent in,
That's really cool. I mean, that, as someone who doesn't have that, the house that I lived in is still standing, but my folks moved out shortly after Biggers lost their school. My folks went elsewhere for jobs and whatever else. Mm-hmm. But it's still standing. And then when I go back home every now and then, I'll drive by and memory lane hits pretty hard at that point. So that's definitely enjoy that you've got that home, the only home you ever knew, that you still got it and you can go back to it. Yes. So I'm a little jealous, I'll be honest with you. I want to talk just a little bit as we get close to wrapping this up here about, consolidation, and when Lynn lost their school and joined in with, I believe it was River Valley at the time. I still call it Strawberry, because that's what I knew it as. But when I was in school, it was River Valley. And then when Lynn and River Valley went together, it became Hillcrest. Hillcrest is still, actually, I called a game of Hillcrest back in December when they came over here to Jonesboro and played Ridgefield. And it still had, you see Hillcrest come up and I'm like, no, man, that's not Hillcrest. That's River Valley, or it's Strawberry. It's just, that's the way it hits me. But, I talked with some of the others about the consolidation, and, how the heartbreak that comes along when you have so much pride in your school, and then all of a sudden your school is no longer there and it's been taken in by another district. What, you've seen the unique side of that. I mean, it's because now you're an administrator at a bigger school, and yes, there are some, a lot of people will say, well, there's some advantages to consolidation, but I feel like there's some disadvantages as well. When you found out that Lynn, whenever you found out, hey, this is going to be the last year, what was like your immediate thought?
I was like, that can't happen. No, Lynn's never going away. Mm-hmm. I don't think your school would ever go away. Even though in the back of your mind, that's taking place across the nation, across the state. But, and you understand some of the reasons that it happens. But in a way, it is very, very, I don't want to use the word detrimental, but you're very just sad that there's no more Lynn Lions,
Mm-hmm. Oh, I understand. Yeah.
And, but again, that's happened with a number of schools across the state. To me, my personal opinion, and like I said, I've been at larger districts and I've been at small districts. I was at Sloan Hendricks for 7 years. And I mean, that's a growing district, great school, great school. There's a lot more pros to a small school than cons. And again, it would vary in your opinion and your perception in how you look at it, because like you say, there are a lot more opportunities for students to get involved in things. But with a small school, and one thing I just think, just growing in technology wise, unfortunately, kids get away, or not all, but a lot of kids get away just from nature,
Mm-hmm.
And when you're in a small school, you're growing up with not a lot to do. So you're out in nature a lot. And I just think that's a vital aspect of connecting. I don't want to sound too hippie-ish, but I just think it's important to connect with Earth,
Yeah.
and to connect with nature. And that kind of gets taken away from you when all the small schools are shutting down. And of course, the valuable, just how valuable it is just to know everybody and teachers to know. And I remember growing up just thinking, probably like a lot of people do, growing up in a small school, can't wait to get out of this school. Everybody knows my business,
Mm-hmm.
get away from this community. But looking back, that was such an advantage, because, those people care about you. I know some people want to be in your business, but but for the most part, those people just care about you. They want you to do right. And growing up in a small community, small school, you get that, and that is just, you can't replace that at all.
Yeah, that's well said. And, I think every little community like that has the busybodies, like you talked about, that want to be in your business. But I felt like the ones that were in my community growing up, yeah, they were up in my business, but it was also because, like you said, because they cared, and they didn't want to see, if you were a good kid, or even if you'd made a few mistakes, they didn't want to see you make a big mistake that was going to affect you the rest of your life. And that's why they felt the need to kind of interject themselves, when needed, and maybe go, get word to your mom that, hey, I don't want to be a tattletale, but, And it was just, it was for your benefit, because as tight knit as these small communities were, everybody cared about each other.
Oh, they did. I can remember my senior year. I only skipped school one time, Marcus, during my senior year. And I remember my mom coming home from work. How was school? I was good. Really? What'd you do? I told her a few things, and she said, "How long are you going to keep on lying to me?" And I was like, "Oh, how'd you find out?" I said, "Well, when you don't miss much, when you do miss, and you don't get a call from a parent, they reach out,
Uh-huh.
and not that doesn't happen at larger schools, but we have, just at the junior high alone, 700 students, and it's hard for me to make connection with 700 students.
Sure.
You try your best, but you didn't have to worry about that at small schools, because teacher's going to reach out to you. And I graduated with 19 kids. My daughter was just making fun of me just a few minutes ago about that. But it's really special because everybody knows you. And again, like we talked about, they care about you. A kid is less likely to get lost in the shuffle at a small school,
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, man. And it's, this is one of the reasons that I'm doing this podcast, is to try to help people understand the uniqueness, how much different it was growing up in a small school.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, I appreciate it, Marcus. I appreciate you doing this and connecting with people and getting that out, because I think that's, I want to say lost, but are forgotten. And just like you said, people don't realize that especially, if people were in a big school their whole life, and sometimes at a smaller school, you feel like, you get looked down upon, whether it's true or not. And I remember feeling that at Lynn. We're playing Walnut Ridge, and we just felt like, oh, that's a big city school, and we wanted to beat the big city school because, they're bigger than us. But
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Jared, I appreciate you taking time to visit with me about the Lynn Lions and growing up in rural Lawrence County.
Certainly, Marcus. I appreciate you doing this. I do. And it was great talking to you.
I want to say a big thank you again to Jared for granting me this interview. I remember hearing about the 7 overtime game he talked about with Maynard, but over the years, I had forgotten about it. I enjoyed listening to Jared give the player perspective on such a wild game. 7 overtimes. I can't even imagine that. Now, to me, the note cards his mother kept on every game was probably one of the most unique keepsakes I've ever heard of someone doing. I want to thank all of you for continuing to listen to this podcast. Be sure and subscribe so you're notified as soon as a new episode's published. And we've got more episodes in the works, including our first episode that will feature a team from outside of Northeast Arkansas. It's one of, if not the best, Class B team to ever play in the state of Arkansas. See if you can figure it out from that single hint. Also, I want to take this time to let everyone know we've got podcast merchandise available now through our friends over at tpublic.com. You can check it all out by going to the website, www.teepublic.com. Search for The Final Jump Shot, and you can just see the designs that we have available for shirts, hats, mugs, phone cases, and much, much more. Lastly, don't forget about our social media pages, Facebook and X, formerly known as Twitter. Drop us a message and let you know what you think of the episodes to this point. Or if you have an idea for a future episode of a player, a team, or even a coach from a school that's no longer around, drop us a message. Let us know who it is, and we'll get them added to our ever-growing list. With all that said, we're going to put a bow on this episode. Thanks to everyone for listening. I'm your host, Marcus Carlton, and we'll see you next time on The Final Jump Shot.
You've been listening to The Final Jump Shot, a Cam Productions podcast. Subscribe to The Final Jump Shot to ensure you never miss an episode.